Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rabbi Mo Capro. I'm the Executive Director of Neshama, the Association of Jewish Chaplains, and I am very, very pleased to welcome you to this, our second in a series of 6 webinars on dementia. Today's topic is going to be dementia through a Jewish lens, and our speaker is a very, very talented author, speaker, individual who's spent many, many years working in this field, Rabbi Dayle Friedman. So without any further ado, I very happily give you Rabbi Dayle Friedman, who'll be presenting for us.
Thank you, Rabbi Capro. It's such a privilege to be here with colleagues and to have a conversation about a topic that is dear to my heart. I'm going to ask that the PowerPoint go on. Oh, Allison, you are great. Thank you. We have Allison Atterbury here being our tech genius. So I just want to mention that on your own screen, you should be able to control the proportion of the PowerPoint and our faces, or my face when I'm talking, so that I don't have to be a teeny tiny box next to the PowerPoint if you want it to be otherwise. But if you want to not see me at all, you can also do that. So in our time together this afternoon or morning or evening, whatever it is for you, I want to shake up our assumptions a bit and invite us to be surprised by framing dementia in what might be a new way. I'm sure that what we will discuss will be in line with your experience, but maybe also challenging. I want to invite you to open your mind and heart. We'll be exploring some perspectives to bring to our work, and there'll be time for Q&A. So surveys reveal that what is it that Americans over 55 are most afraid of? They are more afraid of Alzheimer's than any other disease, even cancer, according to a survey by MetLife. And that makes sense because we are bombarded by terrifying images from the media and popular culture. If you say the word Alzheimer's or dementia, you see people losing continence, no longer recognizing ourselves in the mirror, being at the mercy of strangers. This is terrain that no one wants to enter. So I want to ask you, as you contemplate dementia, what scares you the most about the prospect of having dementia? And I'm going to invite you to put your answers in the chat. We're in the chat, not the Q&A.
It appears that the chat may be disabled.
Okay.
In which case, we might be able to do a Q&A on your end where you can see them and read the questions.
That is just fine. I will share what you write. Please write it in the Q&A. Thank you for letting me know, Cicely and Deborah and Anonymous. So Beth says, being a single person, will someone advocate for me? Yes, it is very much a topic of concern for many people. If I don't have children or a partner, who will come to visit me? Fear of being alone. So that really scary combination of alone and vulnerable. Other fears, anybody want to add? Not being in control of my affairs. Financial drain. What will my children go through as they watch me fade away? Being a burden. Not being able to control my behaviors. Nancy says she wants to be cared about as a person, not just cared for. That's a great distinction, Nancy. Losing my faculties, not being myself. Losing control of normal routines, being alone, not being able to recognize others, or losing memories. So Deborah says her father was terrified and didn't want to be a burden to his family. Well, thank you all for those of you who shared, because those were certainly many of the fears that we hear people talk about. In her fabulous book, Forget Memory, MacArthur Fellow Anne Basting outlines the fears that she sees that are paralyzing. And some of them you all said. But what you perhaps didn't mention is fear of being a burden, fear of being violated, and fear of a meaningless existence, which maybe Nancy hinted at by saying, I want to be cared about as a person because that's what gives me meaning, not just being cared for in what one anthropologist called bed and body work. So Anne Basting argues persuasively that we need to transcend these fears. She argues that we need to enter the world of dementia and develop a more complex set of stories and images to reframe and transform dementia. Many of you enter this world every day, but the fear-mongering culture around us may fail to empower us to open our hearts and our minds to a reality more complex than the tragedy narrative suggested by what Basting calls the fear machine. You all know very well that we can't encounter dementia without witnessing both great tenderness and heartrending pathos. I've been confronting the mysterious world of dementia as a chaplain, teacher of chaplains, and now as a family caregiver for over 35 years. I'd like to explore with you the meaning of dementia and to put this experience in a Jewish framework. But since the challenge of dementia is not abstract, but a lived reality, I thought I would introduce you to some of my precious teachers about the journey of dementia, people I met in the nursing home. There was Mr. Shapiro, a retired pharmacist who was always impeccably dressed in a suit and tie. He often stopped me when he saw me pass by and said, "Excuse me, do you get headaches? Would you like me to show you how to get rid of them?" "Yes, absolutely," I said. Mr. Shapiro said, "Here, you do this, rub your thumb and forefinger across your forehead, and that will make your headache better." Though he didn't remember our encounters when we next met, I understood that this was a helper and a healer, and that Mr. Shapiro was striving to continue to be who he was. Whenever I approached the nurse's station on her floor, Rose was pacing frantically back and forth. And everybody who stopped by, she would say, "Excuse me, what time is it? What time is it?" I watched as Rose got a variety of answers from staff and visitors, some more patient than the others. After perhaps the 10th such exchange, Rose shouted out in exasperation, "This day is never going to end." Esther was a Russian Jewish woman with quite advanced dementia. She could no longer speak, but she could sing, and sing she did all day long and all night. Esther had an amazing ability to take up any melody you started in any genre: Broadway, folk, liturgical, klezmer. Esther didn't sing the words, but she sang la la with great gusto. When we had teenage volunteers in the nursing home, they adored being with Esther and they called her the la la lady. Sylvia always came to Shabbat services on her nursing home floor. She sat slumped over in her jerry chair throughout the entire service. It wasn't clear if she was asleep or awake. But when we sang the Shema, Sylvia would invariably open her eyes and murmur the words. So encountering dementia is often provocative, sometimes surprising, sometimes even exalting. In our quest to make sense of dementia, I want to look at the experience by the person who is living with dementia and by those around them. And we'll see how these observations might guide us in caring for and about people with dementia. And of course, we'll have plenty of time to see how you might want to react to and apply these concepts. So what is it like to live with dementia? Is it solely suffering? Of course, any characterization that I might offer has to be really humble because I haven't been there. I've only witnessed the experience from without. But I'd like to suggest that perhaps people with dementia experience life as a kind of wilderness, a midbar. The 40 years of sojourning in the wilderness after our people's liberation from Egypt were mysterious and difficult. We wandered with few markers toward an unknown destination. We couldn't sustain ourselves without divine help. We were vulnerable to unsympathetic people and harsh realities of nature. We couldn't return to the place of our memories, Egypt, and we couldn't truly know what lay ahead. The person with dementia experiences the wilderness, the midbar of memory loss. In Age-Wise, a wonderfully challenging critique of contemporary ageism, scholar Margaret Morgenroth Gullett recounts some of her 92-year-old mother's remarks about her memory challenges. Her mother said, "What I don't remember is an abyss. I am an absentee. My memory is my worst enemy and my best friend." Losing our memory can mean losing our connection to pieces of ourselves and maybe even significant pieces of connection to those around us. When you can't remember the past and you can't conceive of the future, what you're left with is the present moment. Being present in and aware of the moment at hand can bring joy if the moment is positive, or despair if it's not, for in that moment of wilderness, nothing else is imaginable. The wilderness in which the children of Israel wandered held places of beauty and moments of amazing power. This is also true for the wilderness of dementia. While memory and other faculties may fade, many people, not all, but many people experience an unabated capacity for joy and love, at least until the final stages of the disease. It can be a sweet and tender privilege to simply sit with a person with dementia, just holding hands, just being there without distraction or agenda. Remarkable oases of connection can be found amidst the wilderness of dementia. Against the background of so much loss, I've sometimes seen an especially keen appreciation for life's goodness. For example, my friend Irene described a sublime afternoon spent sitting with her father, who's here in this photo, as they wordlessly watched the lovebirds in a cage in the nursing home sitting room. The two of them were completely absorbed in nature's drama. They had no need for words or action. When short-term memory fails, the world around us can offer many surprises. Rita Bresnahan, who wrote about her experience of caregiving, was moved by this dementia of her mother's experience. She said, "And my mother is constantly surprised by flowers that have been in her room for days, or by visitors who just step out of the room for a while. Oh," she exclaims, smiling broadly at their return, delighted to see them as if they've just come. She lives, in the words of David Steindl Rast, these words: "Any inch of surprise can lead to miles of gratefulness." Any inch of surprise can lead to miles of gratefulness. In the Yotzer, the morning prayer, we say, "Hamechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit." We praise the one who renews in goodness every day the work of creation. The person for whom a familiar, beloved person or object can continually seem a surprise is living those words. Everything is new. In this experience of surprise delight, in which every moment seems new, the person with dementia may experience what the rest of us are too busy to notice. Each moment is a gift, not to be taken for granted. Unfortunately, a person with dementia often suffers because those around them treat them as a non-person. In his courageous book, Dementia Reconsidered, psychologist Tom Kitwood decries what he calls the depersonalizing tendencies of malignant social psychology. That's a mouthful. The depersonalizing tendencies of malignant social psychology. Kitwood lists 17 dehumanizing responses to people with dementia. I'd love to hear from you some examples of dehumanization of people living with dementia. And again, you could put that in the Q&A. Infantilization. Absolutely. Beth, that's so true. It's one of the most painful things, I think, for those of us who care about people living with dementia to watch. What other dehumanizing things? Talking around the person instead of including them in the conversation. Yes, especially if it's, for example, a physician, being invisible, assuming that life is horrible and expressing pity. Right. This person is living their life. They're not necessarily thinking about it as horrible and deserving of pity. Having to be fed and told to do everything. So I want to make a distinction. Holly says having to be fed and told to do everything. Having to be fed is an experience of dependency, which in our cultural surround is considered a terrible, terrible thing. Doesn't have to be, could be otherwise. But being bossed around and told to do everything can feel really dehumanizing. And Lori said what was echoed earlier about talking to the person and not. Lack of choice. So it's dehumanizing, Sarah says, not knowing anything about the person living with dementia prior to their dementia. It's hard to experience a person as a three-dimensional person when we don't necessarily know who they've been. Nancy Kreisman said that her client felt demoted when she moved to a memory care community. It can feel like a big demotion socially to be in a place where you're not treated with respect. Well, thank you all for those responses. I want to add a couple of things that Kitwood says. Deception. There's this whole idea about benign lies and the idea that not telling a person the truth could be a kind thing to do. And of course, people disagree with me, that's fine, but I think it's very disrespectful to tell a person a lie, not to tell them the truth. And that goes as far as telling a person that someone in their family has died, even if they need to be told again. To not tell them is to dehumanize them by shutting them off from relationship with the people in their family and what they're experiencing. So Kitwood says, Kitwood also talks about disempowerment, depriving the person of control over their life. And that was when somebody said, getting told what to do and when to do it. Infantilization, treating people with dementia like what the late Maggie Kuhn called wrinkled babies instead of mature adults with history, dignity, and will. And objectification, treating the person as if he or she were a lump of dead matter to be pushed, lifted, filled, pumped, or drained without proper reference to the fact that they are sentient beings. These dehumanizing responses are, of course, rampant in settings in which elders with dementia receive care. And they can be present even in caregivers with the best of intentions. Personally, I've seen extreme examples, such as a staff member who told a woman who asked to be taken to the bathroom, "You wear diapers, you can just pee in them." But there are also more insidious forms of dehumanization, such as calling a retired physician sweetie or telling an elder how cute she looks. Every time staff members speak about an elder as if they were not present, the elder's dignity is assaulted. Each approach by an escort who begins pushing a wheelchair without addressing the person in it is a diminution of their personhood. The experience of wandering in the wilderness of dementia is definitely made harder by the social context that surrounds it. Just as the Israelites were at the mercy of sometimes hostile others in the wilderness, so too those with dementia are vulnerable to attacks on their dignity through dehumanizing treatment. Conversely, the suffering of the person with dementia can be eased by love and respect and tenderness. When our beloved Grammy Ann suddenly became extremely impaired and unable to sensibly converse or relate to anything but frightening delusions, my sister Jill, of blessed memory, continued to visit almost daily and cared for Grammy with great devotion. She sadly remarked, "This is not Grammy. The person we loved is gone." Encountering dementia in someone we love raises painful questions about what is it that makes us ourselves. This is why David Keck teaches that dementia is a theological disease. As my family discovered, it is demanding to relate to someone you love whose personality has been distorted by dementia. Often the change is negative, as when a distinguished woman becomes disinhibited and suddenly shouts profanity she would never dream of uttering. But sometimes the change can be a salutary one, as I learned when I met the family of Esther, who loved to sing. This is not Esther in the picture, by the way. It's my mother-in-law. I just like to put her in. I saw this family sitting in the nursing home lounge on a Sunday, and I said, "You must enjoy Esther so much. She is such a delight." Of course, P.S. as a not so experienced chaplain, I thought I knew what they would be feeling. Wrong. So her daughter said, "We do enjoy her, especially because she wasn't always like this. She was tough to live with." Esther's dementia brought her family a new opportunity to know and appreciate her that was never before possible. Loving a person with dementia may mean facing a long, slow farewell, losing pieces of your dear one a bit at a time. You may experience the loss anew every time you see the person you love and see again how different they are from the way they used to be. This is an ongoing bereavement, but one that has no marker. When a person dies in the Jewish tradition, they tear their clothes or they at least wear a little button with a ripped ribbon. But we don't have a Kriya ribbon when we are in this space of gradually losing somebody precious to us. And we're doing that often in the midst of a really demanding task of caring for ever diminishing body and mind with respect and kindness. So I hate it when people say you become your parent's parent when they have dementia. And certainly not your spouse's parent or your sibling's parent or your friend's parent. We may indeed need to adjust to radically changed roles. The direction of power and dependency may shift. We may face really weighty responsibilities and naughty dilemmas as we try to balance respect for the person's wishes with concern for their safety and well-being. But we're not the person's parent. We're just in a different relationship. Rita Bresnahan, in writing about caring for her mom, suggested that acceptance is a key part of the task in caring for a loved one with dementia. It is so painful to surrender to our inability to fix the inexorable fading of so much in the one we love. She writes, "More than anything, I need to accept mom where she is and accept my own limitations as well." She said, "I once heard another caregiver explain to a fellow elevator rider, 'There's nothing I can do for him, and I'm doing it.'" One way of articulating this caregiver's spiritual challenge is v'ahavtem et hager, you shall love the stranger. 36 times the Torah tells us to treat the stranger with care, for you know the soul of the stranger. No commandment is repeated as many times in the Torah, perhaps an indication of how very counterintuitive and vexing this command is for us humans. In dementia, the stranger before us is the very person that we've known and loved. And in this confrontation, we're asked, Can you love this so familiar and yet totally strange person before you? Can you let go of the expectation that the person will behave or appear as they used to and appreciate them for who they are and how they are now? In loving this person, can you learn from them and their journey? The poet Betsy Scholl put this challenge eloquently. This old woman isn't my mother, is not what I think. She's a spiritual master trying to teach me how to carry my soul lightly, how to make each step an important journey, every motion and breath anywhere, as though anywhere were the center of the earth. It is a supreme challenge to love the stranger, but that's our job. That this challenge of caring for a loved one can go on for years or even decades makes it even more heroic to overcome impatience, grief, and frustration, and lovingly do what needs to be done. Taking on the work of professionally caring for a person with dementia means facing a terrifying reality, because we live in a hyper-cognitive society. We are identified predominantly with our intellectual side. Sometimes we think we are our brains, so that we believe that witnessing the erosion of cognition is the very decimation of personhood. Many people distance themselves from people with dementia in order to be spared this frightening prospect. In a study of life in an assisted living community, Susan McFadden and her colleagues met a local pastor in the elevator. Seems to be a place where great profundities are shared about dementia. When asked about his visit, the pastor replied, "Well, I have 3 members here, but 2 are out of it. So I just said hello and left my card." The stigma that our society attaches to cognitive impairment can lead caregivers to form powerfully negative assumptions about their limitations. Christine Bryden, a woman living with dementia, decries what she calls the toxic lie of dementia, the assumption that the mind is absent and the body is an empty shell. The implication of this toxic lie is that we who care for people with dementia need to be nurturing not just physical well-being, but spiritual vibrancy as well. Margaret Morgan-Roth Gullett tells about her mother's wisdom in understanding her 3-year-old great-granddaughter, who said to her mother, "I want to cut you." Morgan-Roth Gullett's mother was an early childhood educator. She insightfully said, "She doesn't know what it means. She knows cut it out. Give her scissors," which is an idiom you can say in an angry voice. She knows cut the paper. Give her scissors and let her cut paper. Say, "We cut paper. We cut hair." Listening to my mother, says Gullett, I feel I am hearing from a self that lives quite vitally and often contentedly on islands of land around the abyss. Gullett wishes that the physicians, nurses, and social workers who care for her mom would notice her mother's insight, compassion, and connectedness, the qualities and powers that remain. She says the trick for everyone is to be willing to find out what is left or emerging rather than what is gone. I think about this all the time. I just came back from visiting my 90-year-old mom who's got Alzheimer's disease, and people say, "How's your mom?" Well, what narrative do I tell? Mom is remembering less, ask the same question more often, or Mom and I had a fabulous time eating in a French bistro, and boy, did she enjoy her meal and her red wine. So how's Mom? We have to look at, are we looking at what's gone or what's left? Even the most dedicated caregivers can face frustration in seeking to respect the person with dementia. It's so hard to know what they're feeling, but we need to try. The Torah tells us that God created humanity, b'tselem Elohim, in God's own image. Scholar Stephen Sapp suggests that the task in approaching a person with dementia is to see as God sees. I would suggest that God sees the divine image. The Maggid of Mezrich said, the creation of human beings in God's image is like a father who had a son. Even if the son went far away, the father would always hold the son's image in his heart and mind. According to the Maggid, God had an image of humanity in mind before we were created. And this image is unchanging in past, present, and future. We always look the same to God. Based on this teaching and my own encounters, I would like to suggest that the divine image is not dependent on or equal to cognition or intellectual capacity. Amid the changes of dementia, that Tselem, the image of the divine, remains. Perhaps the idea that a person with dementia is suffering might be our own projection. I'm not saying there aren't times when you hear a person calling out in distress and you know they're distressed, but often we think a person is distressed who might not be. Perhaps the person with dementia, at least in some cases, is even on a higher plane, a higher madrega. In some spiritual traditions, after all, the ideal is to be present in the present moment. And people with dementia are most likely much more able to do that than many of us. In the mystical terms of the Kabbalah, we speak of the ideal of shedding the klipot, the outer shells of superficial utilitarian identities. Dementia certainly has a way of stripping souls down to their essence. Becky crosses the country by plane every few weeks to care for her father with dementia. It's not a burden, but a privilege, she says. He's just pure chesed, loving kindness. That's all that's left. According to our tradition, God remembers for us even when we can't. In the prayers on high holidays, we quote the prophet, Zacharti la chesed ne'urayich. Thus says the Eternal, I remember for you the kindness of your youth, the love of your wedding day, how you followed me into the wilderness. Even when we're mired in the moment, bereft of all perspective, God sees more in boundless compassion. God holds all of who we've been. We may forget, but God does not. For God, Zocher kol hanishkachot, God remembers all the forgotten ones. We're always whole in God's eyes. Our role in spiritually accompanying people with dementia is to emulate God, to seek the Tselem, the image of God. We need to remind ourselves that even when the image is not apparent, it's there. And the person who's disoriented, who's regressed, or even unresponsive, somehow the image of God resides. Christine Bryden reminds us of the power of seeking the divine image. She says, by rejecting the lie of dementia and focusing on my soul rather than on my mind, I can be free of fear and loss of self. And in so doing can also help you to lose your fear that you're losing me. Spiritual caregivers relate to the divine image when we let their faces shine through moments of joy. This is my mom and me enjoying the beautiful leaves in Colorado last weekend. In order to foster joy, we need to get to know the individual, to know what will light them up. We, as spiritual caregivers, have a remarkable tool for fostering joy, and it's ritual. We witness the power of symbol and song and holy times to connect to a part that's still whole within the person, as with Sylvia, who found connection through the familiar words and melody of the Shema. When we empower individuals with dementia to live in sacred time, there's a chance that at least in the moment, Rose will feel that this day is more than an endless expanse of waiting that will never end. We are called to adapt observances to make them accessible. harnessing our creativity to engage people at the time in the manner that works for them. This is my Grammy Ann, and I love this picture because here she is celebrating a birthday and you can see what she used to look like. We who seek to care for the spirits of those with dementia can also act in the image of the divine by remembering for people who can't remember themselves. Ann Basting observes that memory is not just the province of an individual, but rather a relational process. Let's move to the work of accompaniment. The essential core of the work of caring spiritually for those with dementia is to accompany them, to walk alongside or sit or kneel. Our task is not to fix or lead or guide, but simply to be there with them, ba'asher hem sham, where they are. The work of accompanying people living with dementia requires curiosity. We do best when we allow people who are living with dementia to be our teachers about aging and meaning in life. The teaching can happen at levels beyond words and surface conversation. We search agitated behavior and speech to unearth the profound concerns the person's trying to communicate. When we acknowledge and validate emotions reflected in apparently unreal content, we can reach and honor the confused person. As Rita Bresnahan observes, I am learning that the facts do not matter, only the relationship does. We'll learn much if we open ourselves to the person with dementia. I learned from Mr. Shapiro, the pharmacist, not only how to relieve a headache, but also how to retain one's essential goodness amid change and brokenness. This work requires patience. We struggle to be with the person in silence, to be satisfied when nothing seems to be happening. In accompanying people with dementia, we ambitious caregivers need to measure accomplishment in a different way. Any progress may be registered in millimeters, not inches. But we also have to be prepared for magic moments when the person who seems generally quite confused may suddenly speak or connect with great clarity. Anna was a feisty, fun-loving woman who had formed many close relationships with others in the home in the years she lived there. Only when she was 103 and painfully fractured a hip did she begin to be confused. One day, as she sat in her jerry chair, Anna was moaning, saying over and over, "Oi, mama, mama, oi, mama." I sat down next to Anna, took her hand, and I said, "You're thinking a lot about your mother, aren't you, Anna?" And Anna turned to me and said, "It's always mom in the end." She couldn't tell you what day of the week it was. I'm not sure she knew who I was, but somehow Anna knew what really counted. She knew she was near the end of her life, and she was aware that she longed for the comfort of her mother. She believed she would soon be joining her. Ultimately, dementia is a mystery. If we can find the courage to walk alongside those who journey in this wilderness, we too will be transformed. Debbie Everett has identified the surprising paradox of working with dementia. It leads us, the caregivers, to live more authentically. As we learn from those we accompany that a human being is more than intellect, more than memory, even more than cognition, we learn that we too are. We learn to value ourselves for our very essence. So I'd like to stop here. I've talked a lot and for a long time. I would love to hear questions and answers in the Q&A space. And I would like to close with a very brief blessing at the end. So I just want to make sure we leave time for that. Okay, Cheryl asked, isn't it re-traumatizing every time you have to tell someone their loved one is deceased? It might be emotional, but that emotion is, in my view, this is just my view, I know other people disagree, that emotion is real. I actually had this experience with my mom this past weekend. My mom said she saw my stepfather, who's been dead for 20 years, on TV. And she has said this a few times. And I was worried about her because I thought, well, maybe she thinks he left her. Where would he be if he wasn't with her? So I said, Mom, he's actually been gone for a long time. And she said, where was I? I said, you were there. We were together at his bedside when he died. And I told her the circumstances. She said, oh, the whole thing just came back to me. I know. And she was not upset to hear it again. Some people would be, but there's something about being in a shared consensual reality that is dignified, I think. And I mean, the more dramatic examples that I have encountered where somebody lost their spouse and wasn't told, and then wasn't part of the Shiva and wasn't part of the funeral, and then the family's grieving and they weren't included. And that to me feels very disrespectful. And it was really painful because the staff was asked to lie to the person and they didn't want to do that. So that is, I know something about which people differ, but are there other responses, other questions? Zari says, yes, you definitely can get a copy of my remarks. We'll have to figure out how technologically, but I know that Mo and Allison will help that to happen.
I think we figured that out. What we're doing is on our public website, we're going to be having a special place, and you'll need the link. We will send you a link if you're interested. You'll have a link to the recording. You'll also have a link to the material. So yes, you will be able to get it.
And I want to say that I prepared a list of resources for you that include some of the sources that I quoted and some other ones that might be useful to you. So Nancy said, I think it depends that if it really traumatizes the person, if they ask over and over, then we should use what I called compassionate deception. Well, that is the other side of the argument for sure. Miriam says, my rational, non-spiritual father got into a more gentle, receptive space when he had mild dementia. We were together singing Adon Olam to a klezmer tune in my car one day. One of the most precious memories, he let his neshama shine out, his soul shine out. I want to say that sometimes people come into other sides of their souls and their beings when they are in a process of cognitive change, but sometimes the relationship changes and the person hasn't changed at all. And I really want to hold this up because I think it's something that we can offer to caregivers, not in a preachy way, because it doesn't always happen, but a way that I think about it is, if I inject chesed, loving kindness, into the relationship, it's now in the field between me and the person. So even if they haven't changed, the relating may change. And I've talked to many, many caregivers who had very difficult relationships with parents who ended up caring for them through their dementia and ended up feeling that the relationship somehow healed. And none of that was overt and verbal, just something melted away or something changed in the field. Beth says, yeah, of course, maybe it's sometimes respectful and sometimes not. You have to go with the situation. How much do I work with staff to help them understand my approaches? So that's a really good question, Sarah. And in my experience, staff are so busy that it's not like it's overt explanation. I hope that there's a way in which relating to a person as a whole person is in itself a teaching. I mean, I'm trying to be humble about this because, direct care staff sometimes know way more about the soul of the person who's being cared for than I ever will. I think that a lot of the behaviors that are disturbing in how people are related to have to do with how staff are treated and what scarce resources they're dealing with. So I think one huge way to change staff is simply to care for them. Cheryl asked, can I speak a little bit more about how to work with caregivers experiencing the ongoing grief or loss? So one thing I want to say is that acknowledgement and validation are huge. It's such a weird thing that people can be carrying around this very intense backpack of feelings and solace and pain, and nobody even knows it. You know, you could be working with somebody in your workplace and you don't necessarily even know that they're living with this. So acknowledging, asking. I love to tell this story that happened when I was a very inexperienced chaplain, and I was visiting this woman who had one daughter who was her primary caregiver and who was with her mom all the time. And the daughter was furious. The poor mother had diabetes, and they were like taking off her body limb by limb. It was horrible. She had, more than one limb amputated. And I was visiting the mom one day, and the daughter turns to me and she goes, "It's not very spiritual, Rabbi." And I was kind of stunned at the level of animosity coming my way. And didn't at the time understand how much pain was underneath that anger. And had I had the presence of mind to acknowledge that and ask questions about what this was like for this caregiver, I think that would have been really, really helpful. And Nancy Kreisman, who's on now and who just commented, is going to be teaching, I think, maybe in 2 more
2 weeks.
sessions. When, Mo?
2 more sessions.
Yeah, in 2 more sessions. And she's going to talk about empowering family members to know how to make a good visit, which I think can be really helpful because they don't know what to do. And they can often feel really frustrated because they don't know how long am I supposed to visit? What's supposed to happen? What can I do? So I think that'll be really, really helpful.
So please stay tuned. Nancy is presenting, I think it's on the 21st of November. So yes.
Okay, Virginia says, as a Roman Catholic chaplain in trying to be a comfort to a Jewish resident's news of a new loss, is it appropriate to say the Kaddish? What a beautiful question. And of course, a complicated one, because the saying 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So personally, as a liberal Jew, I would say that might be very meaningful depending on the person. Traditionally, according to halakha, Jewish law, you have to have 10 Jewish adults. And of course, there's a variety of opinions about who counts, but we won't even get into that. So that's a question that different people might have a different answer to. So I think kind of trying to judge if you know anything about that person's religious background, but also don't forget shared traditions that we have, like the 23rd Psalm, that can be a great comfort too. And if the person is able to talk about the person they've lost, of course, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. Anybody else have a question or a comment? I was so worried that I wouldn't get everything in and I could have talked slower.
Dayle, let me jump in with a comment. I go back. I was a hospice chaplain for about 10 years until I retired the second time. And I worked for Vitas Hospice here in Central Florida. And I will never forget the first time I went into a facility and I saw a patient who was holding a large doll. And I originally, at first I found that very, very strange. But I just began speaking to her and I asked her what her baby's name was. And she told me. And she began telling me all about the baby. And while I looked at this and said, you know, this is really not my reality, this is her reality. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to share in her reality. And I just, of course, let her continue on and joined in conversation with her about her child. And I'm certain that she was reliving experiences that she had had, you know, in an earlier time. So yeah, I mean, these can be very, very wonderful visits that we have with people. I'm wondering if anybody else out there has had similar kinds of visits or similar kinds of ideas.
Well, Nancy says, people often say, why do you visit when your mom doesn't even know you anymore? Well, first of all, we don't know what gets through. You know, maybe mom can't verbalize that she knows my name. Maybe she knows that I'm somebody that she really loves or who really loves her. And even if she thinks I'm a stranger, or even if she doesn't think, and I can be present and be a loving presence, how can that not be worthwhile? It's like, how are we scoring this thing? Are we saying that you get points if you're recognized, and you get points if the person says thank you, and you get points if the person smiles? Well, maybe we need to change our scorecard a little bit and say, you know, being there is the highest value. And by being there, I'm affirming that this is a person, that this is a human being, that this is a neshama, a soul. So I don't see how that could ever be less than worthwhile. But if I go in with the expectation that something's going to happen, do me something, then I might be really disappointed. I have to say that I really think this idea of transcending the tragedy paradigm is incredibly important. And it's not something that I would want to hit a family member over the head with, but I think the idea of helping family members to focus on what's there, as opposed to what's gone, is could be really constructive and helpful, and so much more enjoyable. An anonymous attendee said, I had the experience of visiting my mom in the hospital. The staff said she had dementia and wouldn't know me. Yet when I walked in, she was fully oriented and could recite things the staff said was impossible. I was not convinced my mom had dementia, rather was in the hospital in a less familiar environment. Okay, so I am not a doctor, but it is definitely true that sometimes there's something called a pseudo dementia, and there's something medical, like a UTI or something going on, or there's depression and it's masquerading as dementia. So that's incredibly important. But I just love more than that, that you, the daughter or son, had the clarity to say, nope, I'm showing up and see what happens. And there is something called, they call it terminal lucidity, which is that even a person who's been really, really confused might be particularly toward death, like suddenly very alert and oriented, but it can happen at other moments too. That's what that Margaret Morgenroth Gullett called the islands of clarity. Miriam asks about the way Jewish songs and rituals awaken memories and the ability to speak or sing. That is absolutely true. I have seen it, and I know many of the colleagues have seen this 1,000 times, that when there's a familiar melody, or even the Shabbat candles, a sight that's a symbolic sight, or the smell of latkes, potato pancakes for Hanukkah, that it clicks in to what I call the part that's still whole. And I'm sure that brain scientists will sometime find out that symbol and melody and ritual connect to a part of the brain that is perhaps less impaired, but it's a beautiful thing to witness, you know, how you can blow a shofar and suddenly, you know, somebody will have a conversation about hearing the shofar when they were a child. Like you light the Shabbos candles and the person will say, I remember my mother doing this. So it's a beautiful way of creating connection on so many domains, but you know, connection to what one has experienced in one's own life and what the Jewish people has done for the ages. And even if it didn't awaken memory, it's still incredible to just exist in the beauty of ritual space and holy moments. Oh, Nancy, that's so poignant. Nancy says, I remember when I couldn't find my mother anywhere in the nursing home. I found her in the chapel, which shocked me. She was not very religious. But when I asked her why she was there, she said, I was asking God why I can't remember. I have heard people with dementia say that God forgot them, which is really, really poignant. You know, I'm still here and God forgot me. And just to be able to talk about that, how it feels to be forgotten, could be something really profound. I just want to say one other thing about activities in places where people with dementia are cared for. And that's that somebody called it the BBC of memory care, bingos, birthdays, crafts. And I really believe in taking people seriously and, you know, inviting them to learn something, to celebrate something, to reach for something is always possible. So let me respect everybody's time. I know this modality of being together is a little strange. I thought I was going to at least get to see all of your faces, which I did not, and I'm so sorry, but I really, really appreciate all of you being here and sharing as you did, and I want to offer a blessing. Confronting dementia puts us in touch with the profound fragility of so much that we cling to in this life. Memory, identity, relationship. In this awesome and mysterious journey, may we remain connected to the source of boundless compassion, who remembers us and binds us all in endless love. May we bring that compassionate connection to all of our relationships, and we say, Amen. So may it be. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much to Allison for all of the administrative tasks involved in making this happen, and to Mo for the vision to promote a conversation about dementia.
Thank you, Dayle, and we're so appreciative that you were here. We're appreciative to all of our participants. Just want to remind all of our participants that you are all registered for the entire series. So our next presentation is going to be next Monday at 2:00 Eastern Time with Rabbi Richard Adress, who is going to be speaking on activities and things we can do with patients, more than just prayer. So it should prove to be a very, very wonderful session. Rabbi Adress runs a site called Jewish Sacred Aging, and I know that I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I hope that each and every one of you will be there with us. So thank you again so much for coming. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman, for your insightful program here today. We're really, really grateful for it, and we look forward to seeing all of you back here again. And Rabbi Friedman, we know that you're going to be with us again on our last session on December 5th, when we're with Dr. Barak Gaster and addressing how do we turn around and deal with advanced directives for people with dementia. And you're going to be talking about where do we go from here? So wonderful. We thank everybody for coming. God's blessings. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Dale, if you want to stay on.